In 2005, Pokémon was almost an online game, not on consoles, not on PC, on the Game Boy Advance. They were planning something 10 years ahead of its time. This is the story of how Nintendo can sell the most ambitious Pokémon game ever. When people talk about Pokémon in the early 2000s, they usually describe a simpler time. Cartridges, link cables, local trades, game that felt complete the moment you turned them on. But that version of history is incomplete, because in 2004, Pokémon was on the verge of becoming something radically different. Not later, not with the DS, not with online consoles, but in 2005. And the project that would have changed everything was never released. To understand what almost happened, we need to talk about China. In the year 2000, the Chinese government banned the sale of video game consoles. The justification was moral panic. Games were seen as addictive, dangerous, and harmful to young people. For Nintendo, this was a nightmare scenario. China was a massive market, but officially inaccessible. Instead of abandoning it entirely, Nintendo took a different approach. They partnered with a Chinese company to form iQue, a legally distinct brand that could manufacture and distribute hardware inside China without violating the ban. Same technology, different name, and for a brief moment, this workaround opened the door to something unprecedented. For years, nothing about this was public. Then in 2020, everything changed. A massive internal leak exposed iQue's private documents, including a presentation prepared for Nintendo executives in late 2004. It wasn't a prototype ROM, it wasn't concept art, it was a full design proposal. Its title, Online Pokémon Project. And what it described was not a small experiment. At first glance, the idea sounded familiar. The game was based on FireRed and LeafGreen. Same counter region, same story progression, but this was only the foundation. Because layered on top of that classic structure was something Pokémon had never attempted before, a persistent online connection. This wasn't just about trading or battling. The game was designed to react to the real world. According to the documents, the game would react to the player's IP address to determine the real-world region. That information would change the game itself. Weather in Kanto would reflect actual regional weather conditions. Pokémon encounters would vary depending on where players were located. In other words, two players in different parts of China will experience different versions of the same world. This wasn't just ahead of its time, it was conceptually closer to Pokémon Go than anything released in the Game Boy era. And this was planned for 2005. One of the most radical ideas in the project had nothing to do with catching Pokémon. It had to do with storage. Offline players were heavily limited. Only a small number of Pokémon could be stored locally. The rest would live online, on iQue servers, accessible from Pokémon centers. This was an early vision of cloud storage for Pokémon. Years before the Pokémon Bank, years before the Pokémon Home. Your collection was no longer bound to plastic and silicon. It lived on the network. Online battling wasn't just menu-based. The proposal described a hybrid system. The Game Boy Advance would act as a controller, while battles would be rendered on a PC screen and not in 2D. Battles would use the same 3D engine and models from Pokémon Colosseum. Fully rendered Pokémon, fully rendered environments, live online competition. This wasn't an evolution of linkable battles, it was a complete leap. Perhaps the most ambitious idea was how content would be released. Instead of distributing event Pokémon directly, the game would unlock new areas of Kanto over time. Players wouldn't just receive Pokémon, they would explore new spaces to find them, new part of the region. The world itself would grow. Maps, encounters, events. Pokémon wasn't just going online, it was becoming a living platform. So why did none of this happen? The documents don't give a single clear answer, but accounts from former iQue developers suggest a slow breakdown in trust. Piracy in China was rampant. Nintendo executives reportedly visited iQue's headquarters and reassessed the situation. From their perspective, the risks outweighed the rewards. Too much loss of control, too much exposure of Pokemon's internal systems, too much uncertainty. The project was cancelled quietly. Along with it, other completed localizations, including Ruby and Sapphire, were shelved and never released. The first Chinese localization of Pokemon was Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon. What makes this story painful isn't just that the game was cancelled, it's that so many of its ideas were right. Online battles, live events, cloud storage, region-based encounters, some of these took a decade to arrive. Others still haven't been fully realized. In 2005, Pokemon almost jumped into the future, and then it didn't. When people ask what the greatest Pokemon game could have been, they usually point forward, but maybe the real answer is behind us. A cancelled project, a leaked presentation, a glimpse into an alternate timeline. We almost had the greatest Pokemon game in 2005, and almost no one knew